Welcome to A New View. I'm Kim, and I'm here with Lee, Shira, and Juji. We are four friends, speakers, and professionals from different cultures, backgrounds, and age groups coming together to offer healing and inspiration. We have a special guest today who guides and mentors people on their spiritual journey over many lifetimes, literally. She is a spiritual development life coach who specializes in past life regression. She is also an intuitive counselor, a psychic medium, a master hypnotist, and had studied shamanism, astrology, and energy medicine techniques, just to name a few. Please welcome Michelle Brock to the show. Hi, Michelle.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you so much for being here. We're so excited to talk to you today. We actually love to start off with a question for all of our guests, which is, what is the best compliment that you have ever received?
Oh, what a great question. That I'm brutally honest. I think that I'm one of those people that often hears that I say things that maybe people don't expect to hear, but that I think that that's what I'm known for. And I always take that as a compliment. So get to the truth.
I like the brutal part of that, because sometimes the truth can be brutal, but that's good for you.
I love that you take that as a compliment, because I think normally I wouldn't think of that as a compliment, but you're right. To be in your truth is the best compliment.
I've grown there over the years. I kind of see it as like, now that I'm a little bit older, that it's something I've stepped into. So maybe that's why I take it with a sense of pride. So
love it. Love it. Well, today we're going to focus on one of your specialties, past life regression. So can you start off by telling us, what is that?
Okay, yeah. So past life regression is a technique that allows me to guide somebody to a place in their own unconscious mind, an inner place where memories lie from the past, specifically from their previous lifetimes. So it involves the concept of reincarnation, which is the idea that we've lived before in a different form, and after death that we come back in a new form, but that our consciousness, that part that survives death, comes with us into the new form. So it allows people to kind of tap into those memories of who they were when they were in a different body, in another time and another place. Wow. Yeah.
No big deal.
Really awesome. I always tell people I never have a boring day at the office. It is literally impossible, because it's a fascinating process.
Did it find you, or did you find it? Like, what was that journey like?
I mean, it definitely found me. I was at a crossroads in my own life, just in a marriage that wasn't serving me. I lost my grandmother, who was my best friend, which was like losing my mother all over again. I was just kind of in this place where I was kind of going through the motions of life. I had two children that were in diapers. We had moved to a different city, so I was isolated, I was alone, just that stuck place. I think that most people can reference. And, my sister had a strange experience giving birth to her youngest son, a near-death experience, actually. And she's fine, and the baby was fine, but somebody gave her a book called Many Lives, Many Masters by Dr. Brian Weiss. Yep. It's a total classic for a reason. And it's one of those books that most people are like, oh, somebody gave that to me. And you pass it to all your friends. It's one of those, it's almost like a magical being in of itself, this book. But I read that book and it just, something lit up in me. It was just like, wow, this is the most compelling, interesting thing I've ever heard. I didn't grow up believing in reincarnation. My parents are religious, and reincarnation was not something that was discussed outside of maybe Eastern philosophy class in college, but I never really personalized it. I was never like, oh, wow, if reincarnation is a thing, who was I in a past life? And so I looked on his website, Dr. Brian Weiss, and saw he was giving a lecture in a city that I could drive to at the time. And I called and they had said, oh, well, two people it'd been sold out for months, but two people just canceled. So I got those 2 tickets, and like 2 days later, went on this road trip. And in the audience, there's 500 people there. They're like all there dying to have this experience with this man. And he's like, I can only choose one volunteer. I know all of you are here. And there were people from all over the world. There were people there was a woman who'd flown in from Japan, and she didn't really even speak much English. She just wanted to be in this man's presence. And there were several Australians there. And I just like gotten a ticket randomly and took a road trip. And I'm in the back with my now ex-husband. And because he's kind of like, this is, because it was my birthday weekend. So it was like, oh, I want to go on this like hypnosis past life, like thing he was kind of like, is this, I was like, no, you don't have to go. He's like, that's a trick question, obviously. Right. So he's sitting there for my birthday. And I don't know, I raised my hand to volunteer, and he picked me way in the back. He's like, you in the back. And I went up, and on stage in front of 500 people, I had this experience that completely changed not only the way I look at everything, just the way that I view existence and everything. It changed the filter by which I looked at everything. And yeah, and I came back to him maybe about 9 months after that, and asked him and did a training with him, and asked him to teach me the technique. And I've been doing it full time, paying it forward in a way is how I look at it ever since. So I hope that
How long ago was that,
That's
Michelle?
fascinating.
That was 2006. So 15 years ago. Yeah.
So Michelle, is
I
this
have goosebumps right now
Yeah.
from that story.
so it sounds like this was something you were trained for and that you learned. Is this something anybody can do, or
Yeah.
I would imagine you have some kind of, inner talent or intuition to begin with.
I did study the past life regression technique from Dr. Brian Weiss, and he and his wife Carol regularly do training sessions for therapists that are looking to add this to their practice modality, or other people who are interested in learning it. But I quickly realized that, I've been an intuitive since I was a child. I didn't know that I was until after this experience. Basically what ended up happening after that past life experience, I remembered dying in my past life and having this experience in what was the realm of spirit, what I understand to be the realm of spirit. And I talked to my grandmother, and I had this perspective of like, why we chose this life, and that there's life after death. And when I came back, I brought a little something with me. I had experiences as a child, but I could see auras. I just kind of knew things. I could like dead people came and talked to me, and that had happened as a child, but this came back with like a little bit of a vengeance. So I had to learn how that worked and how to process it, which led to studying mediumship, intuition, shamanism, energy medicine. So I kind of added those as tools to my toolbox. So when you work with me, I'm kind of bringing a little bit of my own journey to kind of understand all of these different modalities, with me. So that's why I call myself a spiritual life coach, because I lived it myself. I went through this journey of healing and trying to understand, what these things mean, these phenomena, these things that people talk about all the time, having dreams about people who have passed, or children who talk about past lives, or just kind of like that knowing that so many people experience. So yeah, it is a technique that you can learn, but I've made it my the realm of spirit as my life study, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Thank you for that.
Did you have something?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you about your childhood experience, which you sort of answered, but then another question popped up. You said you have 2 children, so have you noticed that in them? Like, is that like genetically passed on, or is that something that like runs in the family, so to speak?
Yeah, definitely. But both of my children are intuitive in different ways. My daughter is a little bit of a medium. My son, he has like dreams that happen. And both of them talked about their past lives a lot when they were a child. I think the difference is the way that I approach them and parent them, because I listen, I'm open to it. And I think that a lot of people, if you spend time with children, you'll realize how connected they are to the realm of spirit and past lives, right? So yes, they're both intuitive, but I've also raised them listening to them and believing them and talking about it openly. And I think that if we all did that in this society, that this would be more of a common thing in this culture that we talk about, because it is common. It's a human thing.
Hmm.
So Michelle, most people who come to you, like what answers are they looking for? Do you find there's themes or patterns in that world?
Yeah. There's 1,000,001 practical applications to doing past life work. Most people are feeling stuck, which was like certainly kind of the place that I came into it from. Healing grief, they lost somebody, trying to understand how that journey is larger than just this life. I work with a lot of people that have phobias. Phobias are a really interesting one. People who have fear of flying, panic attacks near water. I would say generalized anxiety is a little bit of a specialty of mine, where someone's therapist is like, well, you're anxious, but we don't know why, right? So sometimes that's a past life story. I've worked with people whose therapists have diagnosed them with PTSD and couldn't track it to something in this life. So people that have illnesses, physical conditions that do connect to past lives, I get people that have chronic pain. Migraines are a big one. That's sometimes head trauma from a past life. And it's really amazing how, the mind and the body and the spirit are connected. So when the healing occurs at the level of spirit, the mind and the body follow. So that's kind of the premise behind what we're getting to. So sometimes it's emotional stuff, sometimes it's physical, sometimes both, right? Indigenous people didn't see healing as being of the mind or the body. It was all healing of the spirit. And that's the approach that I take as well.
And just one quick follow-up. Is it usually like a session, or can it be multiple sessions to get to the bottom of something?
Most people come and get what they need in one session. And I know that's okay, because my referral rate is so high, right? They come and they got what they need, and they send their mother and their friend and their sister. But some people come every year on their birthday. I have a few clients that do that. It's kind of like an as needed thing. Some people want to do a few sessions kind of close together, but that's usually if they're in the middle of a really rapid period of transition in their life, because it is a very powerful experience that usually takes people weeks, if not months, to kind of download and process afterwards. It's a little bit of a heavy lift, if that makes sense. So, I always tell people you'll wake up one day and be like, I feel like calling Michelle and having another session. But yeah, it's a lot of stuff to think about in a short period of time. So people do get a lot out of it.
I feel like calling you now for a session. But I want to go back a tiny bit to where you said that for some people, let's say their anxiety or their migraine headaches maybe go back to a past life. And once somebody makes that discovery, or you are able to discover that for them, is that something that they can heal from at that point, or is it just the knowing of it?
That's a really fabulous question. The majority of the time, once you realize that that's the source, then you're able to kind of release it and separate from it. I take the release part very seriously. And like I said, that's due to a lot of my shamanic training. We're not going to just pull up a dark story from a past life and be like, oh, how was that? It's like we need to energetically release how you're carrying it in your aura and in your body. But most people right away, once you make the unconscious conscious, then it no longer rules your life. Isn't that a Carl Jung quote? That's literally what we're doing. It's kind of like this, something that was unconscious from a past life. Then you're like, wow, that was from a past life. I don't need to, continue this pattern. I'd say 85 to 90% of people just by sheer knowing are release that pattern themselves.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Great to know. Thank you.
Michelle, I'm just thinking, and I'm going to go back as well to your childhood, because I have friends with children who, you could tell there's something intuitive, and they might even also be like constantly focused on things in the room, or like you could just tell that they're seeing spirit or something's going on. And obviously, for what you do for a living, you're able to really, raise your children in that way to believe, to trust in what they're feeling and seeing and that sort of thing. But I don't know, like, were your parents supportive? And also, would you, if someone's not into this work and they don't even know what this is, and they're like, I'm just curious what advice I could give to my friends, because I'm very into this. I believe in this. I've had a session with you that changed my life, which I'll tell you more about later. But yeah, I'm just curious, like, did you grow up in a supportive household with this?
No, I mean, not that my parents weren't supportive, but my parents my parents are religious in a religion that has very strict rules about this is what we believe and this is what we don't believe. My parents are Mormons. And I spent the majority of my childhood in Salt Lake City. And that's a very specific, like, we believe this, we believe in an afterlife. We don't believe in they do believe in like they call it a pre-existence, but they don't believe that was in physical form. So that's part of why I never really thought about reincarnation. But as far as the psychic stuff, my mother passed when I was still 2. And I remember some of my earliest memories were my father grieving. And my dad married my stepmother, about a year later. So, she kind of came in, I grew up with her, but I remember that time period, and he'd be like, well, he'd be crying. He'd be like, well, your mother's gone. I'm like, she's right there. I could see her. I could feel her presence.
I just got that. I thought you were referring to your stepmom.
Yeah, no, no, like my mother had passed, and my mother was in a coma actually for a while before she passed. She died at the Cancer Research Center in Buffalo, New York. So she had been gone before she was gone also too. My sister was only 1. We were babies. And during that time, I remember like feeling like she was visiting me and like talking to me. Even before she passed, when she was in the coma, I would have dreams about her where she'd come and talk to me and tell me things. And I realized when I would share this stuff with my dad that it wasn't helping him. It was making him more fearful and more sad, because I think that he thought that I wasn't processing my grief, or that I was seeing things or making things up, or whatever a child would need to do. So I stopped sharing it with him because I was aware that I was causing him pain. But it's funny what you talk about, the kids that like kind of stare at things that aren't there. In high school, I was just this like spacey kid. And I went to my 20-year high school reunion a few years ago, and everybody kind of knew what I did for a living because of social media. They were all like, oh, that makes sense. Like, because I was just like, they'd be like, Michelle, and I'd be like, huh? And I'd be in this world where I'd be like, talking to like the universe or something, and like not paying attention in algebra class. So a lot of kids who are spacey, or like they think like ADHD or like whatever, I are probably intuitive, or probably dealing with being empaths, taking on like a lot of energy. Like kids that are, like I said, I think that we don't look at it in this culture in a practical way. And I think that that's changing, right? If we're kind of like, oh, are you like, I used to teach my kids when they were little, just like simple mindfulness meditation. And I used to call it feel your mood, because they're both empaths. So they'd come home and they'd be like upset, but it wasn't their stuff, right? So just like teaching kids like, okay, well, what's my mood versus what I'm picking up on from other people. Like I said, I think that the conversation is becoming more open. But yeah, my parents weren't not supportive, but they just didn't have that belief system. And actually my stepmother came to a workshop that I did in my hometown, it was maybe like 8 years ago. And she was like, well, Michelle, you were always just good at making up stories. I was like, okay, that's fair. That's completely fair. That's where you're, like, and she did the workshop, and like, so she was being supported by being there, but she kind of was like, the way she saw it was that these are great stories. Sure, right? Like, I happen to believe they're really people's past lives, but that's how she saw it, and I think that that's valid. That was where she was at. So, yeah. So there is support from them, but they're kind of like, we don't really. They ignore some of my social media stuff. They'll just be like, we don't know what to do with this. It's okay, and that's all right, right? Everybody has to be to approach it where they're at. And this is my experience. My sister, though, is very, very, very into this as well, and has had a lot of experiences. She's also an empath and very intuitive. And she does dating coaching, intuitive dating coach. So yeah, so I do have the support in the family with my sibling. Oh. Is that the answer ever?
Michelle, you talk a lot about like being an empath and being intuitive and all of these things. So like there's past life regression, which is super specific of like going to a past life. But what about literally just talking to your spirit? Like, and everybody, has guides and things like that. And like the people that have passed that are, potentially all around you when these things are happening. Do you teach people how to tap into that even when they're not in a session with you?
I do a series of webinars and classes that are kind of designed to kind of make people acknowledge that as a given, right? Like if somebody's like, "Ooh, I saw 1111," it's like, well, it could be a coincidence or it could be your spirit guides, right? I think the first step in that is just acknowledging that it's possible to communicate with spirit. And when you do a session with me, which like, you know that you kind of get this guided tour of your unconscious mind. So you're kind of like, wow, I see things. People can talk to me in dreams, or I kind of just know things. So that's kind of a side effect of the past life work as well. So yeah, that's part of my spiritual coaching, is also teaching people like, well, you could go to a medium, or you could learn to talk to your own spirit guides. It's kind of like be your own guru, be your own psychic is a little bit of a thing of mine. So definitely.
Awesome.
Michelle, what are people's reactions to what you do? If you're just at a party and people are like, what do you do? I'm sure there's probably a lot of skepticism and naysayers.
I definitely have it a lot easier because I live in New York City. I think, and I've also lived in LA. People are like, oh, okay, of course. But I grew up in middle America. So I kind of, I get it. I actually have about 4 different answers to the question, what do you do for a living, depending on who's asking. Because sometimes I also just don't enjoy making people uncomfortable. I don't love the shock value of it also too, because as fun as that could be, I have friends, I have kids, I have a boyfriend, like, do you know what I mean? I'm trying to like balance that. But my kids also go to a school that's an international school here in New York City. So I'm surrounded by open-minded people, but yeah, there's always that person at the party who's like, what, or, or they hear about like, I get this a lot. Like I'm the mom at pickup where like the whispers like, there she is. What I was telling you about. And I just own it, I mean, it just, you have to at a certain point. Like, I'm just willing to kind of like, yeah, I'm that weird mom. So, it's all good.
Yeah, there she is.
Yeah, there she is. And actually some of my friends are used to, I'm really lucky. I have a lot of amazing women in my life and close friends, but we'll be out, pre-COVID anyway, we'd be at a bar and somebody'd be like, so what do you do for a living? And they're all like, oh crap, we need another drink for this conversation. They just like, they're used to it. So yeah, I mean, I like I said, I don't like to make people uncomfortable. So sometimes I'll just say I'm a life coach, or I teach meditation, or, what I can code it. But, like I said, it's a mixed bag.
More digestible for some people.
More digestible, yeah. And I guess, like I said, this is maybe one of the reasons why my soul in this life chose to grow up in middle America. I've actually lived in 5 red states in my life. So I'm familiar, yeah, I live in this really liberal New York City. Like I've lived in LA. My sister lives in Miami. These bigger cities have more, international influence, but I'm able to really connect with people. I lived in Indiana also too, right? And so I'm able to kind of really understand where people are coming from based on, their belief systems that they got at church or they have in their community, and to really kind of let people be where they're at, if that makes sense. I'm not trying to convert people to my like religion of past lives. So, it's something that I think serves me well, that I don't have to come in like hard and heavy and be like, you need to know who you were in a past life. I let people come to me.
And it's interesting, Michelle, also, it's interesting that you said how your dad, when you were younger and you were seeing your mom, and that may have, instilled some fear in him. I remember when my eyes were open to the fact that people can see or hear things, because my son, when he was younger, he's 18 now, but when he was 2, 3, I mean, he was always look around, but then there were times where he would get up in the middle of the night and just say, but they're looking at me and they're here and I see their eyes are glowing and they're all over the room. And I remember seeing it intuitive at some point during that time, because that scared the crap out of me. And I was just like, no, everything's okay, whatever. But she said to me to tell him, like, they're watching over you. They're your friends. It's all good, So that really kind of shifted my thinking of like, it's okay, embrace it,
And did that help him, that he kind of like saw them as benevolent and helpful? Wow. Yeah.
Yes.
See, like I
Yes.
said, it's about having these conversations in a practical way and not being afraid of it. I think that's just going to change the channel, like I hope culturally in our society. And I think we need to keep, kind of good for you for trusting to go to like a spiritual mentor or guide to kind of,
But
check,
I
rather
didn't
than being like, don't ever talk about that again. That's scary for me, right? As your mother, I can't handle that, right? You instead tried to understand what he was experiencing.
Yeah. And I actually didn't go to this guide for that. I just happened to tell her about that. And
Wow.
and I said, hey, this is like, and she's like, no, it's good. It's fine. It's great. And I'm like, oh, totally shifted my perspective.
Yeah.
So had I not heard about that, or, this is where I was educated and became conscious of like, this is okay.
My daughter is about the same age as your son. She's about to turn 18, but a few years ago, she has a bunch of guitars in her room because she plays guitar. And one morning I woke up and one of her guitars was on the couch in the living room. And I'm like, she had taken it out there at night. And when she woke up, she goes, yeah, that guy in my room wouldn't stop strumming it. And she just was like, the way she dealt with this was like, I'm taking that guitar out of here. You go strum that in the living room, dude. Like, and and she just said it so matter of factly. She must have been like 14 or 15 even too. She wasn't like little. I was just like, okay, like, she's just like, I needed to just like sleep and get rid of it. So
I just have to say that just the notion of there's so much more going on in the world than we can possibly wrap our heads around is such a great way to live.
it is, right?
So much more to what we think.
Totally. I think is it Albert Einstein quote, like it's one thing to live as nothing is a miracle, or another to live as if everything is a miracle. I totally choose that second one, right? Because life is there's so much more, realms and dimensions and different angles to everything that we can possibly know. So life is an adventure.
Thank you so much, Michelle. We're going to wrap it there for now. Thank you so much. This has been amazing talking to you.
Thank you so much.
Amazing.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We are so grateful to have spent time with Michelle. We hope you enjoyed part 1 of our conversation with her as much as we did. Stay tuned for part 2, where Juji finds out who she was in a past life. Check out Michelle's links to her website and social media below in the comments. And if you've enjoyed our show, please click like and subscribe to our channel. Tell a friend, spread the word. Let us know if you have any comments or questions, or if there's a topic that you would like to request. We would love that. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon, everybody. Stay safe.
Bye.